When I was at the job fair, it was weird because I said the same thing to my partner. I'm like, dude, it's like such a small town. All these huge businesses are here, but we know everybody. So the job fair is kind of weird when you have like family and cousins and all these friends that are there trying to like get these kids to be in a job or something like that. But
I mean, that's how it is around here. You can't go anywhere without
right. Hey, I like small town living. It's fun. So, welcome to Biblical Chili, everybody. Biblical Chili Live, and I guess everyone's out. So just Susanna and me. So we're gonna kind of wing this and see how this turns out. I'm hoping and I'm thinking it will turn out okay. But this is kind of a strange, abnormal question, I guess you could say, but it is not an abnormal topic. I would say, because I've heard this topic come up in church conversations and other type things. So in a lot of other churches that I've been in, and yeah, I don't know. We'll see where this leads. So the question is in reference to imagination. So basically, how should a Christian engage with imagination and just this kind of stuff? And, you know, is God imaginative? And if he's imaginative, what degree should we be engaging in imagination? So I don't know. Let's start. How about we just start off real simple and define our terms here when we talk about imagination. So, we got a third person. Hey, Tom, guy and gal, Mr. Stewart. Okay, so first one, question number one. So Susanna, in your words, what would you define as imagination? Like what is your definition of imagination?
I would say being able to, so hard to say without using the word. Being able to,
right?
It's like walking into an empty room and being able to picture in your head what it could look like, or looking at a blank canvas and being like, I can picture exactly what I'm going to paint on that canvas. So it's like being able to hold an image in your mind that's not currently what you're actually looking at.
Oh, I like that. Okay. Okay. I would say something similar to that. Like imagination is, although in my mind, maybe I'll go a more scientific route or scientific definition. It would be I would say it would be the result of the creative process, like the creative thinking type of thing, like thinking outside the box. So your imagination would be that end result of, you know, kind of thinking through the process. Like I love your analogies, by the way. That was almost like a parable. So like walking into an empty room and seeing the room, what it's supposed to look like after. But that's what I mean, though. In my definition, I would say like imagination would be like the later steps of creativity. Creativity is usually you got nothing and you're trying to generate something out of nothing. And but no, I like that.
Well, I would say creativity is the imagination is like coming up with the end goal, and then creativity is how you get there.
Ooh, okay.
So like if you like when I was growing up, and I mean now we still do this, we love to go look at houses. So like me and my sisters, like we have a realtor friend, and if houses are for sale, we'll go look at them. We're like, wow, they could do this with this, or they could do this with this. Like, and it's our creative juices flowing. I don't know. And so it'd be like when we bought our house, it needed a lot of things done. It was very bland. I'm currently sitting in the worst room, the one left that we haven't done anything with yet. But it's like when we moved in, I looked at it and I was like, I know what this could look like. And I had all those images in my head super vividly. And then having to use creativity, especially when you're on a budget, you might not have all the skills yourself, or you're trying to YouTube the skills. You know, how can I creatively? That's where the creativity comes in. Is how do I actually make this happen once you have that image in your mind?
Excellent. Oh, I like that. So either way, though, imagination and creativity, they have to be. They're not the same. I would say I would not say they're the same.
No, because somehow, like my husband, he's super creative. Like he can make. He'll play really good music. he can cook really good food, he can work on things, and he's very good at figuring out how to fix things, how to work on things. But if I say, I want, or I'm gonna make this picture and I'm gonna have it look like this and use these colors, he'll be like, I can't really picture that. That sounds weird. I'm not sure, but I'm sure like it'll be great when it's done.
It'll be great. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, but like having that same imagination to be able to see things the same way, like he doesn't have.
Right. Okay. So Tom chimed in. Dictionary.com says, the faculty or action of forming new ideas or images or concepts of external objects not present in the sense. Okay. Oh, create is physical. Imagination is intangible. Right. Which is similar. Okay. So we're all kind of on the same keel here when it comes to the definitions. Sounds like.
Right.
Okay. So here's the big question. When it comes to imagination, and I'm sure this will come up at some point, but basically I've heard a lot of mixed answers to how Christians should engage with imagination. So how about we just start? We just start with right there? Can we start there? Yeah, let's start there. How should followers of Christ use their imagination? So this could be like a yes, no, like should we not? I would say we should. I would say we should. Only because I think God has a creative side, an imaginative side, a side of that creativity type of thing because of the variety we see in nature. That the fact that.
Yeah, have you ever seen a platypus? I mean, or an armadillo? Those are some weird looking animals. You have to have some imagination to come up with something like that.
Come up with something like that. Right. And exactly. And I don't know. To me, I like going to botany because, and this is just my personal opinion. Okay. Nobody has to take this for face value, but I think that in this world, we are missing so many different fruits and vegetables that have probably gone extinct. Like many people don't realize, but like, okay, your citrus fruits are actually all the same fruit.
Right.
Your oranges, your lemons, your limes, your grapefruit, they're the same fruit. They just have different levels of sugar and different levels of acidity. That's it. Like they're the same thing. Same with things like, what is it? Nectarines and peaches. They're the same thing. They're just like different sugar content, different sizes, less hair, that kind of thing. Apples and pears, they're technically the same thing. They just have different kinds of sugar content. And I'm just saying, with this creativity, we only have a few different kinds of fruit, but I think we're actually missing many different kinds of animals that have gone extinct since, creation and the flood and all that, I mean, obviously we're almost 6,000 years from creation or more, so I think that God, and I like that you went with platypus because those of you who don't know, like the platypus, their bite is poisonous. They lay eggs, yet they give milk, which makes them a mammal. Yet
they look like a mammal, but they have a duck face.
Right. They have a duck face. They actually have a bill, but they're all like they have fur. Like they have all of these different traits from, isn't their tail almost like a beaver?
Yeah.
Like similar to a beaver tail. Yeah, I'm just saying, I agree with you. Totally. So in reference to that, how should Christians or followers of Christ use their imagination? I know before this, you brought up we should probably use it for the glory of God. I hold on, I got Tom chiming in. Its bite is poisonous. Yes, I know its bite is poisonous. It's because of what it eats. It's got mouth and yeah. Their venom comes from the spines or thorns. Yeah, it's weird.
Huh.
It's weird. Okay.
I didn't really know that much about them. I just knew that they were weird looking.
Yeah, you don't want to be bit by them. Like it's nasty. Like it'll get like, I don't know, what is it, like gangrene or something like that very quickly. Like, whatever your bite will get infected very rapidly because of the venom and stuff. So, but anyway, so how should Christians engage with their imagination?
Do you want me to answer this? Or you're going to answer it?
Go for it. Go for it.
Well, I think like most things, it can be, the thing in and of itself is good, but it could be used not according to its purpose. So we see how God created everything, and he created the platypus, which if it bites you, it's super venomous and it's going to kill you. But if the platypus does what it's supposed to do in its ecosystem, I'm sure it's very beneficial to its system. So, he created all these things that are good when they're used according to their purpose. So
no, we're not. Platypus is venomous. I'm calling you out on that one, Tom. Sorry. No, I would agree with that, Susanna. That's perfect, because I was thinking about this before we went on, and I thought the exact same thing, because look at something as simple as music and food, or oh man, there's so many things like playing, or engaging conversation. Like, all of these things can be used for good and evil. Am I off by that? I think
no. Yeah, like it's one of my biggest pet peeves when people talk about things that they think are great, and they're like, oh, we're going to use this thing that God ordained to be created, or that we used through the creativity God gave us or whatever to make this thing or this medicine or this thing, whatever it is. But it's like, not all things are good. So like this, just like there might be some life-saving treatment for something, there's something else that they made, they experimented with, that ended up like killing everybody, or like
right. No.
There's certain ways that they've made food sustainability different, or they've made farming different. But also that has had, some of those things have had terrible impact on the natural environment and all these other things. So it's like, just because God created us does not mean everything we create is good.
That's a good point. Just because God made us originally good does not mean that we still are. Right. And that's actually exactly what I was thinking of, because like, if you talk about things, okay, so if we talk about things like media, and this is a big one, media, and I know Tom brought up specifically board games, or like I'm question in my mind is storytelling. Before we move on here, I think the leash should come off when it comes to imagination. I think that if we restrict that which we imagine, aren't we putting limits now on how we can be used?
Yes, and limits and hedges and fences are very important.
Yeah.
I disagree. It's like
yeah, I don't know if I could fully agree with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that
go ahead. I'm sorry.
People who have their will set on doing evil, can use their imagination for coming up with terrible, we see all these awful ways to kill people, all these torture devices, all these experiments that have been done on different populations, do without their knowledge, all these just so many things out there that have come from people having an idea that they wanted to do, that then, has a super negative effect on everyone. So if you're, it's like in anything, we do have to, like, there's a, I guess not a parable, but kind of in, I don't remember if it's in Deuteronomy, it's somewhere in the Old Testament, where it talks about how if you're building a house, you should build a protective barrier around the roof so that no one falls off your roof and dies while they're working on it. So it's like, what this means is when you're going out, you should have barriers that you set in place for yourself to protect harm from falling on you and others around you and people that you love, because it's not loving to allow something terrible to happen to someone just because you want to get something done.
Right.
Right.
I think Tom has a comment. He may be expounding on this and trying to bring clarity, because that's what I was saying. Like, I think he's going somewhere with this, but I couldn't tell. Okay, so Tom's diving in again. Okay, so but when talking about believers, so if we just discount the rest of the world for just a moment, when talking about believers, we can't exaggerate. Am I reading it? Exaggerate. Yeah, exaggerate God. So as long as it aligns with Scripture, there should not be limits. True.
Right.
If it aligns with Scripture, I would say probably.
Right. And that would be aligning with God and with his character. So I feel like that's completely different. That would be using it for good, because God is only good and he's only love. So if you are aligning yourself with
his will
and his will, then like what you create and imagine is only going to be good. And that goes back to having things being used according to their purpose or not according to their purpose. So God wants to create things and he wants them to be used how he designed them to be used. So if you're working in the realms of those rules that he, like that way, then that's only going to bring glory to him and only going to make him look better.
Right. And I think oh man, Tom's kind of diving into something I think is very important in the Christian walk. And this was just something I was meditating on today when talking to the Lord about this kind of stuff, is when, if as a Christian, we are in a state where we cannot possibly be wrong. If you know what I mean, like those, I know I'm right type of like feeling, or that type of stance you're taking on anything, even in the Christian walk, that without having that, if I can use the word, the imagination of even contemplating the fact that, well, maybe I'm misunderstanding part of this, or maybe I'm not, then we could fall, quite frankly, for any deception. If we're in that state of it absolutely positively has to be this, and we're not even willing to open up the conversation to something else, and that I would, or would you think, I would think it would have to do with imagination, because if you cannot fathom it being any other way other than your way, wouldn't that be in that realm of I almost want to say humility, to that point where you're like, okay, I think I could be wrong, and I think someone else could be right. Am I off on this, or?
No, I mean, I think
making sense?
that having that pride can really, hinder a lot of things.
I know that's not where Tom was trying to go, but I think it goes down that realm where he's saying exactly like what you said about aligning with God's will. If it's aligning with God's will, then obviously your imagination is playing, like, I don't know. I just preached about this last Saturday while I was doing Sabbath school study, and we were talking about the Garden of Eden, and Satan often tries to put these make God seem restrictive and or limited type of thing, in the sense that, in the Garden of Eden, God said, okay, so don't eat from this tree. And now all of a sudden Satan goes to Eve and says, hey, you know what? This is so limiting. God doesn't want you to be like him. There's a reason why he doesn't want you to eat this tree. It's a bad reason. Da, da, da. Yet when we step back, just take a helicopter view of the entire Garden of Eden, we find a God that created two people, gave them an entire massive garden, which, let's say conservatively, there were 1,000 trees there. 1,000 trees in that garden, and only one he asked you not to eat from. That's Adam and Eve, if I could say this, as long as they were in line with God's will, which God's will was not eating that tree, or not eating from that tree, then God's limitations are not very limited, because it was just one. And they could do whatever they wanted inside that garden, as long as it was just that one. Do you know what I mean? Like because you were just talking about those walls, those limits, those guards kind of thing on the sides, so that we don't, if you will, fall off the roof.
Right.
Tom's chiming in again. Yeah. Okay. I've watched many scary movies where in the middle of a believer.
In the mind.
I'm sorry. In the mind of a believer, I have been inspired. Watched scary movies. Where? In the mind of a believer, I've been inspired. I think he's just talking about talking or watching a scary movie.
Right.
Because I bringing up this, not this one, this one. What
Right.
about using our imagination in storytelling, media, and board games? And well, Mom, maybe, wow, maybe this is a bit bigger of a topic. When it comes to the imagination and storytelling, I guess so Tom's talking about media. I think that's where it would be. You see, I have a more conservative view on media. I think we need to be very careful of what we put in our eyes and put in our hearts and put in our minds. Only because, and maybe it's just because maybe I'll get carried away that I feel this way. I don't know. Maybe it's just my own conviction when it comes to that. But I know that I me personally, need to steer clear of some of that kind of stuff because I know that I can get carried away with different things and because let's say we're using our imagination. It's very difficult to use our imagination for the will of God if we're watching stuff that's contradicting the will of God. Can I say that? Like
Right.
contradicting the will? Yeah. So something that's like violating God's will, and that's programming our mind because everything we watch and we listen to and we read and that kind of stuff, it programs our minds in some way.
Right. That's why I wish Tom was like here because I feel like we probably both have that more conservative view. Like I put pretty strict limits on what I get entertainment from. It's like I don't want to be entertained by something that is displeasing to God, something that he has said either he finds abominable or that is a harmful topic. So even if there's something where that might just be a movie of someone being harmed or something like really dark and twisted, like I mean you can even see sometimes the actors in these movies. Who was it? Heath Ledger that like literally went crazy acting as the
I
Joker in the
think
Batman
so.
movies.
I think so.
So it's like people
Well,
are
I know the one who did. Oh wow, I think it
in
was
that.
because the one the one who played the Joker in the 1990s Batman movies, he actually went to him and talked to him beforehand, and he said, "Be careful playing this character," because
Right.
he knew that I think maybe it was Heath Ledger, but he knew that he was a method actor, which is
Right.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I can imagine it'd be hard for any actor. And we see these people. I mean, I'm kind of against really just any sort of media because we see these people who kind of thrive on people just wasting their time, like watching their movies, or they are very immoral people. So why are we supporting them? Like, why are we giving them our money and our resources and our time and our imaginations and our minds and our hearts and all these things when we should be like putting that towards something so much more productive and something that's actually doing good for the world and our families. I don't know. So I'm kind of more.
Well, there was actually you're bringing up a really good point. Whether somebody agrees with that or not, it is a good point of discussion because there's actually a writer back in the early 1900s, and she actually predicted that. She goes, you know what's going to happen? She said, in the end of days, entertainment is going to rule, and that will be the distraction for the Christians that will keep Christians away from studying the Word of God because we're going to be so distracted with so much stuff, and quite frankly, like home, work. I have 2 cell phones.
Yeah.
Just saying. And
Yeah.
no, I agree with you that, and that's a good word to use is a distraction, something to pull you away.
Yeah. And I just think what we pool our resources to is really important. Like I also don't shop, a lot on like Amazon and stuff like that because I don't really want to support these big companies who I mean all these things like where there's tons of scams on there, and they use a lot of stuff made in disreputable places, and all these things where it's like, I'm not going to buy something for a company. It might be cheap, but I don't want to buy something from a company that might in some way abuse their employees, or like,
Gotcha.
just, I would rather support, like, shop at some local place where I know who these people are and what they're doing with their lives, and I'm helping them out, and it's all ethical, or fair trade, things like that. And I think that we're not careful enough with how we where we spend our money, and where we spend our time, and what we put into our minds, and all of it. Like,
no, I would agree with that. We should, especially as believers, we were just talking about this, being in line with God's will. God wants us to prosper. Tom is kind of chiming in here and kind of like, maybe we should go back a little bit. So this was a question that he brought up earlier. How does the Bible refer to, or where, or what does the Bible refer to imagination? I looked this up just to be sure. I looked up just the word imagination, and this is in the New King James, and it is in 2 locations, only twice. And this is where I'm wondering if there's another word we could use, because I don't know if imagination was a word that was used a lot back then. I don't know. So this is Genesis 8:21. And by the way, both of these, and this is what makes this kind of scary, is both of these are negative. Both of these are negative connotations. So this is Genesis 8:21. It says, and the Lord smelled a soothing aroma. Then the Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground for man's sake, although the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, nor will I again destroy every living thing as I have done. There's another, actually, I guess technically 3 locations, because there's another one in Genesis 6 that says the imaginations of man's heart were evil only continually. And then Luke 1:51, it says, he has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He has shown strength with their arm. He, meaning God, has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. So all 3 of these are not positive things when it comes to imagination. It's talking about the imaginations of man's heart, and how basically they're wicked. Like, the imagination of man's heart is really bad, actually.
Right. Yeah. So like in media and stuff, like, why would we want to encourage that in our own heart by partaking in, whether it's a movie or a show or something that is a result of a very wicked imagination, and doing things that are not pleasing to God. Like, so why would we want to allow that into our own heart and grow? I don't know.
Well, no, and I don't know. I guess that's why I've taken more of a conservative stance as well, is because it's something that a Christian should really honestly think about. And I've had this challenge given to people before. A pastor talking about television and media and that kind of thing, and he said, he gave his congregation a challenge. He said, 60 days, shut off your television, your phones, everything, get off screens for 60 days, and see how different you are. And it was a weird challenge, but it was weird, because the difference really, it was a really, really big difference. So what about something like storytelling? Because that has to do with our imagination. What if I'm making up a fictional story and trying to deliver it to somebody, or maybe reading a fictional book? Although I guess wouldn't that fall under the same category as media? Because if the book is
storytelling
evil,
written down.
What was that?
That would just be like storytelling written down.
Right, right.
Story, like, yeah, if you classify a book as media, then maybe even telling a story would be media. Is media just anything that's like entertainment?
I think media is anything that is communicating something in a, I would almost say, I almost want to say fictional manner, but there is some media that is not fictional, like talk radio and that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. So I guess what you said, anything that's communicating anything. because in that sense, even storytelling, even like if a book is media, even the Bible might technically be media, right?
Technically, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's why it's, but we mentioned this before though, Susanna, it's media in and of itself is not good or bad. It
Right.
depends on what we're doing with it. And Tom's bringing up something specific here. He says, I'm a little fan of superheroes. There is an inspiration in their stories. And I would agree with that totally. But the fact still remains though, is I think when it comes to these type of things, with our imaginations, it would go under that same question that we just got done talking about is to what, basically, if I maybe I could just say, to what end? Whatever media we're engaging with, or whatever fiction we're engaging with, or whatever imagination, the topic here is imagination, whatever imagination or fictional or creative thing we're engaging with, to what end and for what purpose. So like Tom, and mind you, knowing Tom always looks at the bright side of everything. So a lot of that negative stuff may not affect him. I know I have to watch it because I'm usually a pretty positive guy, but I always look for the absolute worst scenario. I know it sounds terrible, but so I can see Tom's point though, because yes, there may be an inspirational story side to that, and if it's inspiring, then great. But for some, I would say maybe it's not. Maybe some people can get addicted to it, because I know there are many that are.
Or like what lessons is that teaching? Like I feel like you're teaching kids and grown-ups to either look up to these types of characters that don't exist. There's that whole, like, maybe this is like a basic thing to say, but it's like real superheroes don't wear capes. So it's like there are all these amazing people who have done amazing things that could be these super inspiring stories of how they've made a difference and helped or saved something, or even like lives like Jesus. Like his story inspired so many people to lay down their own lives for people, and we don't focus on those enough. Like instead we make up all these other ones of these types of people that don't exist and can't exist, and mixing weird things together and saying, oh well, they have all these special supernatural abilities, that's why they can do all these things, whereas like these normal people, they can't. I don't know, like I feel like it kind of takes away from, again, how God kind of intended us to live and do things, as opposed to contributing to it.
I think it could. Tom's got a couple more comments that came in. And he brings up, okay, so this would be a fluid topic based on the individual's conviction. Yes, and that I would definitely say, because we've mentioned this before in biblical Chile, that God meets us exactly where we're at. Because Tom, I know your story when it comes to superheroes. You've even told us this as part of your testimony, that when you were, I'll just say, when you were having a hard time, you actually turned to comics, and it actually led you to the truth of the Bible again, because you had that inspiration that, this person's doing good, and like that kind of stuff. And that's a prime example of God meets you exactly where you are. And I've actually just recently met somebody or saw somebody, it was an interview, I'm sorry, saw somebody during this interview that had the exact same story, Tom, that you had, where the story of Batman and Superman, for example, was so compelling for him that he actually turned to the Lord because of it. But since then, he's delved a little bit deeper into it, and he came to a similar conclusion, Susanna, that you're coming to, which is, well, we really got to be careful with this. And what Tom is saying here is I think ideal. It's a very individual thing, but I think no matter what, God still wants us to grow closer to him no matter what. So it's I don't know, it's that real fine line. And then he says, much like mentioned in the book of Romans.
Yeah.
Where does he mention that in Romans?
Yeah,
we're in Romans though. Hold on.
I don't really agree. And
go ahead.
Not that I guess I don't know. People use individual convictions. It's like, oh well, this could be wrong for you, but right for me. like I think that there's right and wrong, there's light and there's darkness. That doesn't mean that God doesn't meet you where you're at. So he might take something when you were living in darkness to reach you,
and use
but
it.
that doesn't mean that that thing's not still darkness. And it doesn't mean that as you come out of that darkness, you should continue in what was, previously,
Right. And that's kind of why I said this is kind of that fine line, because God will reach us exactly where we're at. But at the same time, that's why I mentioned that he does want us to grow forward. Now, when us moving forward and growing closer to him, once again, though, that is not an individual conviction thing. That's an individual thing. God is working with us where we need to be worked, if you know what I mean, or where, maybe I shouldn't even say where we need to be worked, where we're willing to bend to his will. If you understand.
I hate to use I don't want to use too extreme of an example, but it'd be like if someone was in prison, and they like their experience in prison totally changed their life and made them want to repent and turn back and do good. That doesn't mean that they should stay in prison or that being in prison is good. Or, if you have someone who's in an industry that's
no, but it's that growth thing. It's
yeah,
the growth. It's that
he'll use those things and he'll use he'll meet you where you're at and he'll use different things because he created all things.
Yeah.
And
he's creative.
He's creative
when trying to work with us.
Yeah, but that doesn't necessarily make that thing. I don't know.
No, I see where you're coming from, because I see, and
I've heard
it's a weird thing. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I've heard people say that going to prison was the best thing that ever happened to me. It really made me change my life. For them, it might have been I saw all these people and was like, I don't want to be that way anymore. Or finally experiencing something, or the people that they talked to, or could have even been the pastor that they met while they were there, or the different, things like that. So it's this experience was the best thing that happened to me, but again, that doesn't make that experience
right
something that should be repeated over and over and over for that person.
Tom says, those are awesome stories of inspiration through hard times. Like the old radio Unshackled. Old radio show. Do you know that one?
No. Did you ever find that Romans verse?
I did.
Know what I'm talking about?
I don't know. Tom, do you know what verse you're talking about? Much, because you mentioned much like Romans. Yeah, individual. Yeah. See, and that's the thing. Wow, man, we went from imagination all the way over to personal conviction stories type of thing. But that's, you see, okay, so for example, the example down here, it says board games. So what about board games? What about using our imagination when it comes to board games? Well, it would still fall under the same category that we're talking about before. Board games is a neutral thing. It's a thing, right? It's not, or it's a category of a thing, maybe I should say. It's not even a thing in and of itself. There is not something out there called board games. Board games is a concept. It's a category of an object. And just like media, just like storytelling, it's a category of communicating. And so they are not good or bad in and of themselves. But for example, my mother felt so convicted about board games that I under board games, I also throw card games and dice and that kind of stuff into the same category. So my mom, she would buy us Phase 10, Uno, those type of regular card games, but I don't ever remember her playing those games with us kids, because when she was growing up, she came from that era that all card games were under the category of gambling. You know what I mean? So her natural conviction growing up through her entire life was, I don't play card games. And so then she would also toss, Monopoly and Yahtzee and those type of things into that category in her mind. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, it's necessarily good or bad. That's just, it was her conviction to say, hey, listen, I don't even want to interact with it. And so she didn't. So as far as I'm aware, like I said, I don't remember that happening very much. Whenever we played board games in my house, growing up when we were kids, it was a very like just the kids were doing it. So so it's that I don't know, it's that fine balance there.
Right. Well,
Tom,
I think
hold on, Tom's got something. The chapter speak of stumbling block. Oh, being a stumbling block. It's a super.
I don't think being a stumbling block is a super fun thing.
No. I think he's talking to me when I was talking about board games. It's a super fun thing because I was talking about categories.
Right.
Okay, so chess, military and strategy, Monopoly, the love of money, Risk, the loss of marriages and friendships. Yes, that Risk is actually illegal in my home, just so everyone knows. But I would say when it comes to going into a board game, oh man, I just had a conversation like this with my wife. It wasn't about board games; it was about something else. But board games in the Becker house has made me afraid in tubes of toothpaste. That's a conversation for another time.
Oh boy.
It was bad. He got damaged by a tube of toothpaste because he attacked somebody in a game. Like in the game, like rolled a die and attacked somebody in the game, and they threw the toothpaste at him, and he got a bloody lip from it. It was bad.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So okay, so perfect example. Thank you, Tom. So my example or my point in when it comes to the board games is, okay, Susanna, if you and I are going to play a board game, okay, but you're going into the board game with a heart or an attitude of, yeah, let's just have some fun, let's have good conversation, let's engage in friendship, like these just type of things that usually board games are for. It's for, a family time to come together and just have a good time together and have a laugh. And then I'm coming into the board game, Susanna, because I know I've played this game before and I know I can beat you because I've played it.
Destroy you.
I will destroy you. Right. So, okay. So that's just a super like simple example there. With that example, with those two examples, could I be entering into the game, like playing a board game in sin? Because my heart is not in it for that friendship, that growth. My heart is in it for that pride of, yes, right. I've done it. I've defeated them.
At that point, your prideful heart is already the sin. So no matter what you do, you're probably going to be having issues.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, board games in and of themselves are just a thing. Like Tom said, a very fun thing. But I would say the content of the board game would matter, because there are some card games and board games that are a little off-putting to me. Like side note, there's one that the basis of the game is to lie about what you're selling somebody so you can get the most stuff. That to me, I'm sorry, that to me it seems like a bad idea. Like I would never.
That's a great idea. I mean, that's a great example, because that's something that people would still be like, "Oh, but it's just a game."
Right, it's just a game, right? So mind you,
what's the moral of this? What's the lesson? What's the outcome of this game? Like, yes, and
mind you, everybody just. Sorry, I was just gonna say, like, everybody listening to this, I'm not trying to bash you if you own a game like this. That's not my point in this. My point is, I cannot in good standing play that game, because the whole game is about, they might as well have just called the game lying, because that's the basis of the game. You have to lie every time you play. Like every round you have to lie. And I saw people play, like you can get on YouTube and you can watch and that's the wonderful thing, actually. If you're ever looking to get a new board game, you can get online, you can actually look to see people playing the first like hour of the board game or half an hour of the board game. I know that sounds boring, but when you're a board game fanatic, like in my family, you don't want to go out and spend $20, $30, $40, $50, $100 or something ridiculous on a board game.
They're expensive.
They're really expensive.
Actually, I wanted to buy categories, and it was like $50 at the store, and I ended up getting it at Goodwill for $2 with all the pieces.
Yep.
But it was like, why is this $50? This
you're right.
It's been around forever.
I just want to say, if your convictions are not there, then, we're not condemning you by any means. We're just saying, like, we as Christians need to rethink our actions, even when it comes to something like imagination, What is imagination? Okay, so does God have an imagination? I think he does. I think he's very creative. But at the same time, how are we engaging with our imaginations? How are we using them? I can't, maybe you remember where this is, Susanna. It says in scripture, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do all for the glory of God. In other words, what that is very specifically saying is that you can eat for the glory of God and you cannot eat to the glory of God. You can drink to the glory of God and not drink to the glory of God. You can, play a board game to the glory of God and not play a board. You see what I mean? Like it's a very distinct thing that's saying, listen, these type of things you can do to the glory of God or not.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I think some of those things that, people will say, oh, like it's just good fun. Like those are some of the most dangerous things because they seem like there are a lot of things that are those wolves in sheep clothing that seem really harmless, but they're not. It's like most Christians would be like, oh, engaging or like watching pornography or, watching. Yeah, it seems to be the only one people really agree on. like, or like I was going to a party,
I wouldn't
and
actually.
we all played strip poker. That would probably be bad. Most people would probably agree that that's like maybe not what you should be doing. But like some of these other ones, they dress them up so well, and they're like that you don't really realize that it's kind of the same thing.
Okay, so Tom has a question about that. I say, so now what of Dungeons and Dragons? Is it okay to make believe that you're another person? I cannot ever play a character that isn't me. I've even tried to play a bad role on Skyrim. Skyrim is a video game, and I fail every time because I end up being a hero 100% of the time. See, but that right there is that I would say that's a perfect example. Actually, video games is a perfect example because there are many video games out. Actually, forgive me, but the vast majority of video games today, they either the hero is actually not the hero. The hero is usually the anti-hero. Like they're a hero, but they're the hero because they want to be the hero and they want to be the one, and they don't care what everybody thinks. They're not out there to do what is right. Or you are actually playing the hero, but you are out there just slaughtering millions of people by the time you get to the end of the game or something horrific, right? My point is he just brought up something like Skyrim. Skyrim is a video game that you can play the good person, bad person, or everything in between. Now, with this game, that I think is that perfect example of, okay, you're playing a video game, but how are you playing it? Does it, when you're obviously using your imagination, you're getting into this role, you're getting into this character, if you will, but hold on, what actions are you partaking in that character? Is that an action that you would actually do in real life? Go ahead.
I guess, and like, what's the purpose of that role, or what's the purpose of you playing that game and playing that character? Is good coming from it or is bad coming from it? It's like, I don't think just playing a character is bad. Like, acting, going to a play.
It'd be another one of those like category things. It really wouldn't be it would be a thing. It wouldn't be a thing. It'd be a category of a thing in and of itself.
Right. Well, like for example, every year since, you've read the book of Esther, right?
Yeah.
So there's the bad guy, there's the king, and then there's
Mordecai.
No, Mordecai's the good guy, right?
Well, yeah, Mordecai's a good guy. I'm sorry.
Then there's the bad guy. Who's the bad guy? I think.
Oh, what was that? What'd you say?
I think it starts with an H.
Yes, it did. It's oh no.
Okay, well, there's a bad guy. There's the king. He's kind of medium. But then there's the really bad guy, okay? And it's like that whole story in Esther started for the Jews an entire new holiday, right? It's called Purim. So since then, every year, they've celebrated that holiday, and they do like a reading of the book of Esther. So they play the roles, and it's this whole thing where when the bad guy's part comes up, someone's playing the bad guy. But when the bad guy's part comes up, everyone boos at him and hisses at him, and they're like, you suck. And
okay, so what you're saying, though, hold on. So what you're saying, though, is the purpose in it is for reminder.
Well, right. So in this instance, not the saying that you can only act if it's a Bible story. Like,
No.
but like this, like, they do this every year. You might be playing the bad guy, but your purpose is to bring
Tom says
glory
have
to
fun.
God and to either show something as being good or bad, but it's all in the realms of his truth and his goodness. So if you're even making a story about, some kid who did this thing, or I don't know, like, I feel like that's fine. But
see, and these type of things though, they're really hard because we can't see, like, even like, okay, so Tom's next comment is I can never ride a dragon in real life. Okay. But I don't think that's the point. Is we can't just give this list of yes and no's. Like, we can't just give this list of, well, these movies are good, these movies are bad, or it all has to do with, and I think you kind of hit it on the head, was what's your reason behind it?
Yeah.
Like, for what purpose are you doing this? Or if you're engaging in something, what kind of heart, like I get the example of a board game. So what kind of heart are you going in to playing this board game? I don't know. It's just funny that you bring that up, because actually I was going through a study in Deuteronomy, and Deuteronomy, there are things that the Jewish people do that God says very specifically, you are to do this in remembrance of ABC, XYZ. So, like, in remembrance of you leaving Egypt, going to the promised land, in remembrance of you crossing the Jordan, these type of things. So wow, I never did that on the air.
Bless you.
Bless you. My daughter says this all the time. She goes, bless me.
Oh,
whenever she sneezes.
so
And
cute.
we've gotten in the habit, I know this is going to sound terrible, but we've gotten in the habit of not saying God bless you to her, because we know she's going to say God bless me.
Oh,
I feel bad about it, but it's, yeah. But I can't find it. Isn't it Haggai?
oh, no. It's like Hiram, or I don't know, something like that. Anyways, he's the bad guy. His name starts with an H. He sucks. And when he comes on stage, you go boo, and then when Mordecai or Esther goes on stage, you go yay. I mean, I don't, but that's what they do. It's the thing.
Haman.
Yes.
Boo.
Right. Yeah. Bad guy.
So okay. So.
And I guess, I mean, again, I might be more of
Gandalf. No, not Hey Gandalf. So sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, I'm maybe more of an extreme. I feel like this, we talked about this at the beginning, or maybe this was before the podcast even started. People look at how a lot of Christians live their lives and think that they're living a very restricted life. Like, wow, you can't do this, or you don't want to do this, or it's like all these rules, all these restrictions. But it's that it's the opposite of that, because God's ways are actually freedom. And it's like, if I'm doing something for fun, like, not that I don't think you should be able to have fun, but I don't want to do something just because it's fun necessarily. But if I do something, that's pleasing to God, or if I do something that aligns with, that, or if that's how I live my life, then I will have fun, and I will be joyous, and I will have all these things. And that's what, like, a lot of people in the outside world don't really understand, is that, I don't, yeah.
Well, it's a good point too, because, like, even something like a board game or a video game, well, that's why, honestly, one player video games it got to the point where, and this is my conviction, it's kind of disturbed me. And that's why I tell people I'm a recovering gamer, because I want to get away from it. You know what I mean? Like, I want to stay away from it, because I used to play video games a lot, and quite frankly, waste a lot of my time just playing video games. But my point is this: when it comes to these type of things where we're engaging with this type of stuff, so like let's stick with board games. Okay, board games are meant to be played with multiple people. And the purpose in that, like I said before, if I'm going into a game because I know I can just beat the snot out of somebody, or am I going into a game to say, hey, listen, I haven't seen these people in so long. Let's have some fun together. Let's play a card game together and talk, or, let's play this game together that takes 3.5 hours, which, by the way, most of our board games take hours upon hours upon hours upon hours. Yeah. Like most of our games are like really long. But the thing is, though, is we all get to sit together and have a few laughs and just, have fun. We usually have snacks there, and we're having a good time as friends being together. It's just something that we can do as friends being together. Like some friends get together and play volleyball. Sometimes this is usually a winter thing. Sometimes we get together and we play board games, so I think a lot of it has to do with our heart. Oh, you're muted.
Some friends might get together and go to a strip club and have a great time. So just because something's fun and you're doing something together doesn't mean it's good. So that's where we have to grow and learn, and eventually so I think doing things as a family and doing things with friends and building those relationships are very important, but you want them to be built on a very strong, light foundation, not the other things.
Oh wow. Tom's got 4 comments. So how would we pull those who look at us this way closer to us? Okay, so he's talking about how Christians are usually viewed as restricted. How would we view those people closer, or how would we bring them closer? I think exactly what you just said after that, Susanna, is that helping people understand that God is not a God of restriction, but he is a God of order. And, he's a God that lives on freedom. So if for a prime example, I had one, this was a parenting tip given to us, and it's a really good tip, but it's really difficult to execute. He actually has the gentleman who told me this. He actually has 2 sons, and he said he tries to raise his 2 sons by the way of freedom that God has, that God raises us. And in other words, make your decisions, right? Because he doesn't want us to be slaves. And so he said, I went to my sons when they were very young. They were still single digit age, right? And he went to them and he said, okay, sons, he said, if you want to do something, assume the answer is yes, unless it's going to hurt you or somebody else. And he said, right? You're like, this seems weird, and it is, okay. But what his reason behind it was a really good point.
That sounds good to me, honestly. It's like that sounds
good. Yeah. So what it does now, though, instead, is he said, okay, now what this did was it forced my boys to start thinking of the moral implication of every action they ever partook in. It's like most parents are, mommy, can I do this? No. Daddy, can I do that? No. That's like the thing in our society. But hold on. If they don't know why, then we just grow up, the kids get older and then they end up leaving the home and then they do whatever they want. I'm free, right? But instead, he's like, now my children, instead of coming to me and asking, and instead of just jumping in head first, they actually got to stop and say, is this something that dad would think is okay? Like, I don't know. I thought that was good. Guilty. I don't know what that's about. It must have been like 5 minutes ago. Sometimes we get together and play flag football. Sometimes we play, capture the flag in the middle of the night and somebody busts their knee.
Oof. Yeah. Well, back to the last question you said about bringing those people in.
Yeah. It was a good question.
Yeah. Well, and that's where you see God's plan and purpose all the way from Genesis to Revelation, where he picks Abraham and he trains him, and Abraham produces offspring and he trains those family members, and then from there we get an entire nation of people who, there's this whole system where there's the priests, and only the priests do these things, but then there's everyone else. But then God tells them, you're going to be a whole nation of priests, because what do the priests do? The priests were the ones who were in closest connection to God, but they were the ones who trained in God's law and God's ways. They ministered to the people. They did all of the distributing charity funds and all these things. They were that. So they were an example to the nation of how to be. And then eventually the entire nation was to be a nation of priests ministering to everyone in that way, where they were supposed to look like God. Because remember, God is invisible. He's invisible. So the only way people are going to see God is by his image bearers, those people who get to know him and who want to look like him and walk like him. And so you start with Abraham, and then eventually you get to the point where you have a whole nation of priests who are God's image bearers, who are then, to be sent out. That's how, Peter, he tells a mixed group of people in his book, First Peter, Second Peter, whichever one of those, that you are a nation of priests. You are a holy nation of priests. So like he told this people, these aren't just Israel. This isn't just Israel he's talking to. He's talking to Greeks and Romans and I don't know, all these people in his letter. And he's saying, you guys are now the nation of priests. So it's grown to where, now they've seen through Jesus, what that looks like. And then they're going to go and spread it out to the entire world, so that eventually the whole world has the opportunity to see what God looks like. And so like that's basically the story of the whole Bible, cover to cover, is then at the point everyone's going to see God, and everyone is going to say, we had a chance and we picked one way or the other. So it's like how to bring those people in is by getting to know God better, living according to his ways, and then people see that it's light and they see that it's freedom. I mean, people say all the time, like, how do you have no anxiety? How do you have no stress about anything? Like, you just like, how does this happen? Or, just like finding joy in these things, it's freeing, and it's beneficial and better for everything, so like when people see that, they want in, they do.
Right.
They can't help it, because light is good and people are drawn towards the light. So if you're not drawn towards the light, then that's probably not the like, I mean, I don't know, like I feel like it's but yeah, that's
being that example.
That's how inevitably like people are going to be drawn into it, because it's like you see all these people gathered around a warm fire, drinking their hot chocolate and laughing and having a great time. We're like, I'm on the outside where it's dark and cold, and like I want into that life, So
Tom's got a question about Abraham before we close out here. Was Abraham ever trained though?
Absolutely. How else did he know God's ways? I mean, it says when he died, God told Isaac that, Abraham lived according to all of his ways and his statutes and his commands and his ordinances, which is crazy because none of those were even given yet. So obviously somehow, whether just being a friend of God, he was.
I would say obviously some of them were given to him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And Moses technically codified the law, but I think God was in direct communication with Abraham.
Right. So
I think that's how he was trained.
He didn't just though even, he was humble enough and open enough and receptive enough to receive the way to live and the way to be, and he was very intimate with God. So that's being trained and learning and growing. And
no, I love that. Okay, we're reaching way over our hour here.
Wow. We were like, are we going to be able to talk about this?
I know we were. We started this off. You're like, I don't know, and I'm like, we're gonna see how this goes. I don't know, because this whole imagination thing. Because the original question was this: how should followers of Christ use their imagination? So, like, how should we engage?
For good.
Yeah, right. For good. Punchline for good. Tom's got a couple more comments here. He learned over and over and over. Abraham was a slow learner. Very slow learner. Maybe.
I mean, also, like, I think, like 100 years passed during these things. So I don't know.
Yeah, right?
God, like, just like what we're reading in Exodus right now. He doesn't teach you everything all at once and expect you to get it.
Little bit.
We read Abraham, I don't know how old he was when he was called, but even to the point where he was promised it, or when he finally had his son, he was 100. So that's a lot of years So you think, you go to school and you're expected to learn calculus and science and art and music and all these things. Like, I feel like there's only kind of a couple things you need to figure out in like a large amount of years.
So. Right.
God is patient.
Yes, he is.
And he gives us time.
Meets us where we're at, right?
No.
All right, so I'm going to close this out with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time together, that we've been able to dive into your word. Father, I pray that you'll help us to be in line with your will, whether it be with our creativity, with our imagination, or whatever it be. Lord, help us to be within that, and help us to bring glory and shine for you, Jesus, before you return. We love you so much, and we thank you in your heavenly name. Amen. Well, this has been Justin.
And this is Susanna.
This has been Tom. And thanks for joining us, everybody. We will see you next week. Yeah, hopefully with more.
Oof.
Oof.